Ever feel like you've just scratched the surface of a familiar story?
I know what you mean.
Well, that's what we're doing today, diving deep into a lesser-known chapter of Jesus' ministry. It's found in the Urantia book.
Right. This text, it presents itself as a kind of spiritual revelation, I guess you could say. It offers, additional teachings and contexts that go beyond the traditional biblical accounts.
And we always encourage listeners to approach any source with, a discerning ear.
Yeah.
But think of this deep dive as a chance to explore a different perspective. Like, we're talking about someone we all thought we knew.
Yeah.
We're specifically looking at Jesus' tour of the Decapolis.
Oh, okay.
It was a region of 10 cities, a real blend of cultures.
It's interesting. This tour, it's described as, well, light on miracles.
Yeah, heavy on the teachings.
Yeah.
Almost like a deliberate choice, to emphasize the power of ideas over, I guess you could say, the spectacular.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
So imagine joining Jesus and his followers, roughly 100 people, on this month-long journey.
Okay.
No dramatic healings, no parting of seas.
Wow. Okay.
Just deep conversations, like really thought-provoking parables.
I see.
And that brings us to our first stop, the city of Hippos. This is where Jesus, well, he drops this bombshell parable about forgiveness.
Oh, tell me more about this.
So picture this.
Okay.
A king forgives an enormous debt.
Okay.
We're talking like millions in today's money.
Wow.
Only to then have that same servant turn around and refuse to forgive a much smaller debt owed to him.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful story. It really is. It's like getting that winning lottery ticket and then refusing to tip the cashier $1,
I get it, yeah.
Have you ever felt that tension, that gap between being forgiven for something big, but then struggling to forgive a smaller offense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the Urantia book really highlights that, true forgiveness, it's not about these warm, fuzzy feelings. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
It's a choice. It's something we make. It's an act of will. It transcends our emotional state, which, let's be honest, can be messy sometimes.
It's like, yeah, my feelings may still be hurt, but I'm choosing to move forward. I'm releasing this grudge.
Precisely. And the Urantia book, it adds this really interesting layer to this.
Okay.
It talks about how this whole idea of forgiveness as a choice, it plays out in groups, especially when you're thinking about, community decisions, making sure things are fair.
So connecting it to today, it's like instead of just focusing on punishment, we might explore things like restorative justice programs or, community mediation to address harm.
Exactly. Yeah. It raises the question, like, how do we as a society balance holding people accountable with offering compassion? Like giving people opportunities to grow. It's definitely something to ponder as we move to our next stop on this Decapolis tour.
Our next stop takes us to Gamala. And here we encounter a disciple named John, who's, well, he's having a bit of a crisis.
Uh-oh.
He comes across this guy, Aiden. Aiden's out there preaching about Jesus, right?
Okay.
And John's immediate reaction is like, wait a minute, who authorized you to do this?
Yeah.
It's an understandable reaction when you think about it.
Yeah.
Imagine dedicating yourself to a teacher, learning their methods, their ways. And then someone comes along, seemingly bypassing that whole process, and starts proclaiming the same message.
Right.
It's like that feeling you get when you spend all night studying for an exam. And the person next to you who, never even opened the book, they ace it.
Exactly. And, this story, it kind of highlights an important theme that runs throughout Jesus' teachings.
Oh, okay. What's that?
This idea that rigid structures, official authority, they aren't the only paths to truth, or for that matter, to doing good.
So what matters more? The perfectly credentialed messenger or, the impact of the message itself? It's something to consider as we navigate a world with so many voices all vying for our attention.
Absolutely. It challenges us to be open, to hearing truth from unexpected sources, even those outside of our usual circles, our beliefs.
It's almost like Jesus is saying, hey, don't get so caught up in the how, focus on the what.
The message itself.
Right, the message itself. And that leads us to another fascinating story. This time we're in Abila.
Okay.
We've got a disciple named Nathaniel, and he is really wrestling with how Jesus interprets Scripture.
Yeah, this is interesting. Nathaniel, he seems to favor a more literal approach to the Hebrew Scriptures.
Right, like taking it word for word.
Exactly, but Jesus, he encourages a more nuanced understanding,
Yeah.
taking into account the context, the deeper meaning.
Okay, so not just what it says, but like what it means.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really interesting. Because the Urantia book, it suggests that Jesus taught that Scripture, well, it reflects the time it was written in.
Makes sense. Like it's a product of its time.
Right. It's full of truth, but that truth needs to be interpreted.
Exactly.
You need discernment, recognizing that knowledge and understanding, those things evolve over time.
Absolutely. It's not about just throwing Scripture out the window.
Right.
It's about engaging with it, but on a deeper level, taking that historical context into account. Allowing for our understanding to grow.
It's like appreciating, I don't know, a classic piece of literature. Right.
Right, exactly.
Like understanding the historical context, it enhances the meaning.
For sure.
It doesn't diminish its power at all. And what I find really fascinating is that the Urantia book claims that Jesus chose not to have everything he said written down.
Really? Why is that?
To avoid later generations clinging to just these rigid interpretations.
Oh, wow. So, like, no four Gospels as we know them.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Right. Just imagine, what if Jesus' teachings were passed down just through oral tradition,
Yeah.
evolving and adapting over time?
Fascinating. It really makes you think about how we approach these religious texts today, The importance of context, interpretation, really getting to the heart of their meaning.
It kind of reminds me of that quote, I think it's attributed to Galileo, where he says, the Bible shows the way to go to heaven, not the way the heavens go.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of evolving understandings, shall we move on to Philadelphia?
Let's do it.
Okay, so in Philadelphia, Jesus, he delivers this powerful message about faith being an active force,
Okay.
not just, a passive belief system.
I like that.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of, okay, I believe this, check, moving on.
Right. Yeah.
Next.
Right. But Jesus, he challenged that whole notion. And the Urantia book, it even describes him as converting, get this, passive doctrines into calls to action.
Passive doctrines, huh? That's an interesting way to put it.
Right. What do you think about that term, passive doctrines?
Well, I think it refers to those beliefs that we have that just kind of stay stagnant.
Oh.
They're just in our minds. We don't really do anything with them. We don't translate them into action. Jesus, he challenged people to live their faith, not just, talk about it. So less about just believing in God and more about letting that belief inspire you to actually make a difference in the world.
Exactly. And I think one of the most powerful examples of this is, his interpretation of turn the other cheek.
Right, because that's so often misconstrued.
Oh, for sure. People see it as passive, weak.
Right, like you're a pushover.
But, the Urantia book, it really emphasizes that Jesus intended it as a call to action, like a strategic, nonviolent resistance.
So it's not about being a doormat, but about, choosing a different kind of strength.
Yes, a strength rooted in compassion,
Right.
A refusal to be drawn into that cycle of violence and revenge.
Wow, that's powerful.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Embodying your beliefs in your actions, even in the face of adversity.
It's about taking that leap of faith and putting it into practice, right?
Absolutely. And, what I find so compelling about the Urantia book is how it portrays Jesus. Like, he's taking these big, almost abstract ideas about God, and he makes them so relatable.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, like the concept of God's love. It's not this distant, cold, impersonal force.
Right.
It's portrayed as this real, tangible love, like as real as a parent's love for their child.
And that kind of love, that deep, unconditional care, it makes you want to do something. It makes you want to reach out to make a difference however you can.
Yeah. It reminds me of this quote, I think it's from the Dalai Lama. He said, "Love and compassion, they're necessities, not luxuries."
Wow. Yeah, he's right. Without them, humanity cannot survive.
Powerful words.
They really are. And as we're wrapping up this whole exploration of the Decapolis tour, I'm left with this sense of, I don't know, like a challenge.
Yeah.
And possibility all at the same time.
Yeah, I hear that.
Because if Jesus could do that back then, challenge the norms, rattle some cages, inspire real change, what's stopping us from doing the same today?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what small act of courage, what choice, even if it seems insignificant, could we make that could, start this ripple effect, a ripple effect of change in our own lives and the lives of those around us?
Maybe it's just, I don't know, reaching out to someone we know who's hurting, or speaking up when we see injustice, or even just, choosing kindness in a moment where it'd be easier to be, well, not so kind.
It could be anything, really. Like maybe it's committing to learning more about something, deepening our understanding, challenging our own assumptions.
Because as we've seen in this deep dive, real growth happens when we get out of our comfort zones, when we engage with the world in a way that really matters, right?
I think so.
So as you go about your week, listeners, think about the stories from this lesser-known chapter of Jesus' ministry. Remember the teachings we talked about from the Urantia book?
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what's one small action you can take, to turn belief into action? Choose love over apathy. Be that force for positive change that the world needs.
Yeah, I love that. Keep those gears turning, everyone. Until next time.